Joining me right now is Newark Councilman Ronald C. Rice.
Joining me again, our Newark Councilman Ronald C. Rice.
Joining me now from D.C. is the Senior Director of Government Relations for the National Alliance is Ron Rice.
What up, sports fans? Curious Formula here with a new video. What's up, sports fans? Good to see you guys tonight. This is Curious Formula. If you're new to the platform, I'm Curious Formula. I am your host, your moderator, your brother, your friend. Come on in. We're going live and we're going to talk about some of the issues that are important today. We'll also invite you to put your feet up on the table. There should be some cold drinks in the refrigerator. But before we start any of that kind of stuff, you got to make sure you do something for me personally. You got to subscribe. You got to like. Share the content as well. Hit the notification bell that you know when we go live. We go live every Wednesday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be there, be square. And we're going to have some real good topics tonight. We happen to be here. I'm rocking the shirt. This happens to be the 118th anniversary of the founding of the greatest fraternity God ever made on planet Earth. I am referring to the oldest, the boldest, and definitely the coldest fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Shout out to the bros. Happy 118th. We got a lot more work to do. And we're going to talk about sort of what the fraternity role ought to be in the world today. But I thank you guys for taking the time to rock with me. And even though it is my Founders Day, I could think it not robbery to spend the time with you. So let's jump into it. The first thing we're going to talk about, how do we end violence and poverty in the Black and urban communities across America? Question for you. Have you ever wondered why, after decades of fighting poverty and fighting crime and violence in the Black and brown urban communities, that they still persist at the levels that they persist in? I think it's because the right and the left make money and get attention proposing solutions that they know will never be implemented or tried due to partisan division. And to be frank with you, the solutions are actually a combination of the right and left proposals. And I know people have said that, right? If you look at the presidential race that happened, it was like, I'm not voting for people because they keep saying the same things over and over again, and it never leads to anything, right? The left is part of the problem because they believe that big government programs are the key, right? Just more money for education, more money for housing, more money for drug rehabilitation, more money for child care, more money for health care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we just have a good government program for all the ills of our community, that would finally solve them, right? So my answer to that is, though, it would help, right? We all need more investments to solve problems in our communities. I'm not saying that, but to do that and to think that we can create a program that's going to solve every issue of our community and fund it adequately to solve every social ill in our community is not feasible. It's not possible. And we talk about, well, they send tons of money around the world for foreign policy and to deal with wars and stuff. They do that, but that's national security. There's never going to be an investment from any country on the face of God's earth to those kind of problems that are going to adequately solve those problems in terms of a program. And even if they could, right? Did you want a government program that regulate every aspect of your life? Like, I have a problem with this. There's a government program. I got a problem with this. There's a government program. You're actually allowing the government to control your life, and how high you rise and how low you fall is going to be based on a government program. They have a name for it. It was called Russia, the Soviet Union, where government would answer all of your needs. It doesn't work. The right has another problem too, right? The right believes that government is the problem, right? That private and community, nonprofit sector is how we solve all these issues, right? If we just had more choice, if we just had more self-reliance, if we had government investment, but it was in community organizations, right? Block grants to these organizations, and then let's leave them alone, let them figure it out. If we had more morality, if we had more family and faith and community control, then we wouldn't need government, right? And we wouldn't need government controlling our lives. The problem with that thought is that, the problem is that government is the only entity that has the kind of resources that you can put behind in large quantities to those institutions to do stuff. You can't really rely on private industry or private corporations who are about making profit, right? You can't really rely on philanthropy because leaving and learning and leaning on the good wishes and the good, thoughts and prayers and philanthropy of the richest among us is going to run out, right? No rich person wants to be solely responsible for uplifting entire races of people or entire communities, right? And nonprofits and the church and other sort of non-governmental agencies, right? They don't have the necessary resources. So government has to put resources in. So what is the answer, right? If we're going to solve the problem of poverty, crime, violence in urban communities and in communities of people of color exist, I think there's an answer to it that I used to bandy about when I used to be on city council in Newark, New Jersey, and working with a number of colleagues on ways to solve poverty. Studies we saw, research we saw, kind of led me down this particular path. And I want to get your thoughts and opinions about it as we talk about it here. I think that we need a multi-pronged targeting of the most at-risk families, concentrating on the children in these particular communities. Now, what do I mean by that? Mayor Baraka, Ras Baraka, in the city of Newark, New Jersey, shout out to my former colleague, current mayor of the city of Newark, currently running for governor of the state of New Jersey, something I support because I think he has a clear-eyed view about this issue. Mayor Baraka said in one of his State of the City addresses that Newark's crime, and when you think about urban cities, you think about in New Jersey, you think about Newark, you think, oh, it's crime infested. You think about Irvington, you think about some of the urban centers like Camden, oh, they're crime infested. But Mayor Baraka said quite emphatically, it's something that we all know if you're in elected office at the local level, that Newark's crime occurs in about 15 to 20% of the entire city of Newark. That means all the crime in the city of Newark happens in an area of the city of Newark that's 15 to 20% of the entire. That means 75 to 80% of the rest of the city is predominantly and primarily crime-free. Talking a few break-ins and burglaries that happen even in suburban communities, but it's basically crime-free. But that 15 to 20% gives the bad name, gives the black eye to the entire city, right? So my question is, if we know that, right? If we know that, then why don't we do the following? Why don't we identify the families with that 15 to 20%? And I think it's lower. I think it's 10%. I think it's more like 10% of the people in a certain community actually commit most of the crimes, actually are below the poverty line, like severely below the poverty line, I mean, below the federal poverty line, and commit most of the crimes and the violent crimes that happen in our city. So if we know that, if we know it's 10%, in a city like Newark, it's 300,000 people. We know it's 30,000 people, 30,000 families that are part of this. Why are we not, first, identifying families with a history of violence, prison, drug use, and poverty through the generations, right? Because I will tell you, if somebody commits crime, I guarantee you they're committing crimes because daddy committed crimes, mommy committed crimes, and maybe even grandpa and granddaddy, right? These are the people who actually have committed the crimes. These are the people who have generations of drug use and abuse, generations of being in the penal system, right? Generations of dysfunction, generations of poverty, generations of bad educations, generations of dysfunction that have been perpetuated with this small group of people. So second thing is, if we literally grab and gather these families, hear me out, to live in a well-resourced, modern living development with rent-free and a guaranteed income. Now, here's what it is. I know it sounds like a lot of government freebies, and I just sort of beat up the left about that. But here's what you would get for some of that government investment. Number one, it wouldn't be for the entire city of Newark. It would be for this 30,000 people, right? Maybe 20,000 people. Maybe you get the worst of the worst generationally, right? 20,000 people. But you're giving them a modern living facility. You're giving them live there for rent-free, entire families now, and you're giving them a guaranteed income, something that the city of Newark and other cities have been talking about and have given to help people stay above the poverty line and meet their needs. What you're doing when you create these kind of living situations are the following. You put those people in those living conditions and you provide quality public schools, that are not a part of the traditional education ecosystem for 6 days a week. That would include instruction, tutoring, extracurricular activities, etc., from the government, but from philanthropy, from Divine Nine, fraternities and sororities, the Links, the Boulé, all the homegrown Black institutions within our community, nonprofits, etc., for mentorship, for self-esteem building and support. And then you add in traditional and non-traditional medical treatment for families that are dealing with bipolar disorders, ADHD, and other learning, emotional, and distress and trauma from government, philanthropy, etc. And then you layer that on with substance abuse, recovery treatment, counseling, with exercise, diet, regeneration, meditation training, dispute resolution training. You put on top of that job training for available jobs in state and opportunities out of state. You know what I mean? Opportunities are out of the state that these cities are in. Truck driving, CDL licensing, right? Training people to meet the jobs of the 21st century so that when you get a training certificate, when you get training in a certain trade, it leads to an automatic job. We identify what those jobs are, not only in the cities like Newark and Buffalo and Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, and the like, but in other states that are dying to get a workforce. North Dakota, South Dakota. I went to a conference once where somebody was there. I said, "What are you here for?" He goes, "I'm looking for people who want to work." Even working class blue collar jobs, they don't have a workforce in South Dakota. They don't have a work. So somebody who has a record, somebody has a past, may want to escape that entire community and go someplace completely different where housing is cheaper, where buying a home is cheaper, where wages are higher, and your dollar goes for a better, goes longer, farther out, and have a new clean start. We don't train people to go to South Dakota or North Dakota or to get CDL licenses or to learn how to do refrigeration, things and skills that can immediately help somebody get a job, get them out of the black market economy, and actually be able to support their families, right? You top that with home ownership, right? Opportunities. The unit that they're living in right now, after 5 years, you give them the ability to own it like a condo. Jack Kemp talked about this, Republican who talked about enterprise zones. He talked about getting public housing units that people were living in, teaching them skills about home ownership, and basically selling it to them for $1. You're making somebody an instant homeowner, and you teach them how to be homeowners. So this unit we're moving them into that actually is rent-free, that's state-of-the-art and modern, with a guaranteed income, you give it to them after 5 years of being successful in this kind of program with all these layers, and then they're homeowners, which immediately gives them access to credit, which immediately cleans up their credit, which immediately gives them access to wealth building. You want to create wealth in America, you got to own a home. This is the way to do it. And then you emphasize on top of these different levels, you emphasize families, family planning. You teach skills like cooking and cleaning and maintenance and upkeep of your communities and how to be loving parents and teach children how to be obedient kids to their families. And then you encourage spirituality as the basis for it all. You encourage all faiths. You don't make it mandatory, but you provide it along with the investment that you're talking about in education and those kind of things. You provide something that Senator Cory Booker has been talking about in terms of baby bonds, right? In terms of giving kids a fund, an account, as soon as they're born, that the government will match your payment into, and it gives them a future. For what? For college, for home ownership, for wealth building, right? You give them investment education on top of that. And it would work because our problems are common, but they're also generational, and they're going to require a super minority of our community committing these problems and things in our community. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that if you take all these levels that I'm talking about with this set number of people, it would work because the problems that our community have are being committed by this super minority, right? This minority of people that live in our community, but have generations of issues and problems that developed over time and got worse and deeper and wider. and we never address them at the root. And more importantly, we never address them holistically at the same time. You've heard about a drug program. You've heard about re-education. You've heard about teaching people a skill. You've heard about we need better schools. You've heard about, well, we need guaranteed income. What I'm talking about is a deep dive and a commitment to do all of that, and do it with a small super minority that essentially are creating all the problems to no fault of their own. But social media and our leaders have convinced us that this is the face of our community, even though it's a super minority. That the majority of our community, this is what they are. This is who they are, and this is all that they have to offer. Happy Founders Day, Black Uhuru. Thank you. I got my nice shirt on. Exactly. The myth has to change, and real leaders need to step up. They got to make legislative changes in order to make these things happen, right? They have to provide not just government resources, but the time, the talent, and the resources of every sector that affects our life. They have to use proven data and research to develop realistic metrics and hold all folks accountable for results. They have to recognize change will not happen over time, right? We didn't get into this overnight, and we won't be fixed overnight. This will take a year's commitment, 5-year to 10-year commitment to change the longitudinal design and the altitude and direction of some of our most devastated families over generations. It has to make room for error and mistakes, and it has to admit them when they happen and make corrective action and change, right? Too often we try good programs, and because they're not perfect, we throw out the good because they're not perfect, right? They're going to be stops and starts, mistakes and errors for this kind of planning, for this kind of investment, right? And we have to admit when that happens. But we don't pull out of our stakes and say zero sum, that this ends now because we can't show and prove how we did this right? We will make mistakes in doing this. Mistakes will happen, but we have to correct them when they happen. And then we need to follow those families for 5 years after their initial 5-year program for potential relapse and for support. Folks, this can actually happen. And there are resources there where government can't meet, then philanthropy can join in and corporations can join in. And you may ask, why is the private sector investing in something like this? Because the workforce for America, and there have been people who've talked about this, is going to be increasingly Black and brown in the next, as we go into the deeper into the 21st century. And there's just not enough white people, smart, college, well-educated, to do the jobs of the 21st century that America is going to need to stay on top. The investment of corporate America, the investment of philanthropy, the investment of government, the investment of nonprofits, the investment of every sector you can imagine has to be in on this, because it's about preparing a workforce for the future to keep us dominant and to keep America number one. That's the selling point. And so my hope is that we'll talk about these kind of things in the future, because the problem is not the Black community. The problem is not those folks in Newark and the Camdens and the and the Dallases of the world or the Chicagos of the world. It's a small number, a super minority that needs an investment on so many different levels. But if we did it all at once, and we did it for a significant amount of time, and these things were tracked metrically and supported in the way they needed to support it, entire families, you would change the trajectory not only of their families and these communities, you'd change the trajectory of America. And that is what is necessary to keep this nation in number one. All right. Tell me what you think about that. I see some folks in the chat, but I'd love to hear you talk about what you think about that idea. And we're going to elaborate specifically what that means going in the future, but I want to introduce that to you guys now. Okay, we're going to talk about some trending topics as we go forward before we get to our main topic as well, second main topic, which is talking about financial things. But some of the things that we want to talk about are faith and relationships. Those are some of the things we're going to be talking about as we go forward here. And we have a great video that I want to talk a little bit about and get your thoughts about a pastor who's being caught in a hotel, and what that means for faith and what that means about the morals of our nation. Francis, can you hit that?
Guy Dawson from Dawson Speak TV and D&D TV. Thank you for rating, commenting, subscribing, and sharing the videos on this channel. Much love to those who support this comment section. Thanks. Now, before I get into this story, I want to say that Dawson Speaks TV does not discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, gender expression, age, national origin, disability, marital status, sexual orientation, military status, or political affiliation. Now, one of my subscribers sent this story to me, and they said, Dawson, man, it's an epidemic. What's going on with these men in the Lord's church? I said, ma'am, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but I'll do the story. Now, this story comes out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and it involves a charismatic pastor and a T-woman. We're going to say T-woman because you know they're very sensitive down here on the YT. Pastor Antonio Limo dos Santos Neto, married father of 3, yes, he has a whole family at home. And according to reports, he was very passionate online, always talking about his religious and moral beliefs. Too bad your religious and moral beliefs couldn't keep you committed to your wife, buddy. But let's move on. Pastor Antonio, married father of 3, decided that his wife wasn't fun anymore. She wasn't a party. According to him, she was a bore, a complete bore, so he booked the services of an individual named Luan Costa da Silva, and he brought her to a local hotel. Now, according to investigators, Pastor Antonio told them that once inside of the hotel room, he discovered that the individual was a T-woman, and he immediately called off all activities because he felt disgraced. Really? But you didn't feel disgraced about being a married pastor going to a hotel room cheating on your wife. Nor did you feel disgraced, Pastor Antonio, about going to an area in Sao Paulo where men like you pick up T-women for services. Come on, bruh. You ain't slick.
All right. So just to the story is this, and this video goes on talking about other scandals with pastors. The pastor that was named in this first sort of part here was caught with a trans woman, and she wound up expired, right? And you know, in my estimation, that's not what's scandalous. Obviously, it's a tragedy and a violent situation that should never have happened. And rest in peace to the victim of that heinous crime. But that's not what was scandalous. Lots of people in the church for years, right? Jimmy Swaggart, and others have been caught in scandals, you know, with women, with men, with trans women, trans men. I mean, you name it, who were supposed to be men of God, right? That's not the issue here. The problem, in my estimation, is that there are just way too many people calling themselves men of God without any kind of receipts, right? I'm not trying to judge this brother by looking at him with the suits and the smooth way he looked, right? I dare say he is not a major minister, a major pastor, right? You do recognize that you can, for $75, literally get a license to say that you are a preacher, a man of God, right? You don't have to belong to any church. You can literally get it. There are people who get like these certificates and these registrations just so they can perform weddings. I know a couple of people who do that, but you can call yourself a reverend. We used to call them jackleg preachers back in the day, right? But they're out there, and there's a bunch of them. And if you don't know who a jackleg preacher is or can't recognize them because you're not a Christian or you're not somebody who's in a faith or, you know, you're not Muslim or whatever, you can be fooled by these people. So this is a guy who has mental issues. This is a crazy person. This is a violent person. This is a person who not only should not be calling himself a man of God, this guy shouldn't be on the streets, much less being called a pastor. You know, the Bible does tell us, if you're talking about the Christian faith, that pastors, those who lead men to Christ, have a higher responsibility than the average Joe, right? The average person out there, the average person that they are going to lead in terms of faith and having a relationship with the supreme being. But I will also say that one bad apple does indeed spoil the bunch in America and around the world when you're talking about preachers and faith and religion, right? The world loves to make the exception the rule, right? Even though the overwhelming majority of ministers are doing the work, right? Married, families, work 7 days a week, don't get any time off, are always looking out for their sheep, always looking out for their flock, rarely take vacations, rarely have time to themselves, rarely have time to even be with their families, very rarely have time to go on vacation, very rarely have time just to have fun, right? They're always in the public eye. There are ministers who are fearful of even, being seen having anything to drink, right? Even though they may have a drink or two or drink wine. I remember Dr. King was frightfully afraid of people finding out that he was a chain smoker for fear of what it would look like, not just as a civil rights leader, but as a man of God, right? Depression rates are high amongst ministers. Suicide rate is high amongst ministers. It's quitting is high amongst ministers. I have heard my pastor say many times that he is in a group therapy regular meeting of other fellow pastors, other fellow ministers, so they can talk over their problems. But even then, they get criticized, right? Your pastor goes to see a shrink, right? The only thing worse might be like a guy in the mafia going to see a shrink. Shout out to the Sopranos, right? But like that's the word, like the world that we live in is most ministers like are doing the work, but it only takes like 1 or 2 stories to like put a shadow over all of them, right? Like this guy here and like some of the other pastors that you see written about. And then there's others, who just get talked about, who just get done, right? Because they are pastors. And if you are anti-religion, you're going to find everything about them to criticize. Listen, even if some pastors do this, right? Pastors, men and women, people of God are still human. They're still fallen and they're still flesh. And the same insecurities, the same feelings, the same desires, the same things that we go through, they experience too, because they're human and because they're flesh. And more times than not, they say no to it, right? Power is an aphrodisiac. I should know. I was an elected official. And if you're a man or a woman, powerful, big church, important person, there are people out there who find power intoxicating and will throw themselves into. And like I said, the overwhelming majority, which we don't see, of ministers in the faith say no to that. Imams in the faith say no to that. Do their jobs and do their jobs well. And so all I'm saying is that when we see these kinds of things that happen, these kind of people being called out, these kind of incidences happen. They do happen. They happen far too much. But it also clouds over. It also, unfortunately, superimposes itself in the psyche of Americans and people who watch this and they go, see, I told you, the American church ain't this, Christians ain't this, ministers are just trying to take your money and they're living these kind of lives. And the fact of the matter is, the opposite is true. If you knew how many people actually do live a humble life, actually do sacrifice, actually don't run big churches, they run storefront churches with 25 members, and they will pull out money that they don't have. Most ministers have a full-time job, right? They do this on the side. They don't have enough money in their churches to even be a full-time pastor. And they do it because they love God and they're God's representative, and they do the best that they can. And it doesn't mean that they're perfect. Doesn't mean they don't have faults and foibles. Doesn't mean that they are not sinless. They sin. Everybody sins. The only person who didn't sin was Jesus Christ, right? But have a little grace when you see these people. Have a little understanding that they're sinners just like us. They just have a word and they're just forgiven. And in that same vein, if they can be forgiven by a power greater than us, then we should be able to give forgiveness to them ourselves when they don't quite meet the standards that we hold for them, which we don't even hold for our own selves. All right. Next thing we want to talk about, this trending topic, is Corey Holcomb dates women in poverty. Francis, roll that tape, man, because this is funny.
I searched Corey Holcomb, right? and I hit news. You know, that's how we get started. You know, I'm like, let me see what's going on with my man.
Yeah.
Corey Holcomb dates women in poverty.
Of course.
wait, what? And it said you were under fire a little bit, taking a little heat online about. Was it a joke or was it just like? Is it a real strategy for dating?
I think it's a great strategy, and I'm proud of it. And there was a lot of people who were happy to feel good about what they do, because that's what I do. I put it out there. But dating women in poverty that's a humanitarian thing. Girls who need me, and I'm here for you. I'm here for you. You know what I'm saying? What am I supposed to date? Girls who are not in poverty? You know what I'm saying? I date women.
Right.
Women in poverty are practical people. It's amazing how people get so tight in the ass over stuff like this, man. When we really, if you think about it, you're not doing anything wrong. If I prefer women, just like some women prefer guys that's rich, and you never hear nothing about it.
I'm gonna give you that. Like what we talk about it. You know, like there's women who will never date you because you don't have the money that they expect.
Exactly.
This is an actual thing. So
all
the
you
opposite
women
is
who
what
are
you're.
problem with me dating the women in poverty, I think you hating. And a lot of the women that's hating are the women in poverty. I'll be to see you. The women in poverty, I'm here for you. Look me up.
Santa Claus, ladies and gentlemen.
Santa Claus in the flesh. You didn't think Santa Claus was gonna look like this, did you?
Hey man, the beard, you're extending it a little bit. You could grow into like a Santa vibe for December.
Maybe,
you know?
or just look, ladies, I'm gonna put some weave in my beard. Yeah.
All right, it's done.
All right, so let's get some claps up for Corey Holcomb. Black Uhuru said a humanitarian thing. He said people they get tight chested. Yeah. So Corey Holcomb dates women in poverty. He justifies it by saying that women say they want rich men, right? I follow a lot of this stuff on here. Here's my disclaimer before we start going into it. I am a very happily married man, 11 years, right? And the problem I have with not just Corey Holcomb, but other people who even though he makes good points, right, is that these people who comment about relationships on social media, particularly Black relationships on social media, ain't a damn bit married, or they have been married and they've been divorced once or twice. The great Kevin Samuels, who I always believe had really good points. Don't beat me up, women. Don't beat me up, ladies. But he was a twice divorced man himself. A man who said don't marry women with kids, and he married somebody with kids, right? So the bigger question, I think, with Corey Holcomb is not whether, like, should you date a woman in poverty? Do women want rich men, right? It's the bigger question is, do people have, and I mean specifically Black people, do they have reasonable versus unreasonable expectations about relationships? Now, as I mentioned, I've been married for 11 years. I'm not going to pretend like every day is Sunday and that it's all unicorns or whatever, but by and large, my wife and I love each other very much, and we make allowances for their allowance too, right? To quote a great point in the forum, in a poem that we know, it's give and take. It's good days and bad days, but you make a commitment before God, and if you love each other, you try to look out for them, right? I happen to believe that today most people have unreasonable expectations, and some of the content I see on here has been on the Black manosphere, right? And as you guys know, I'm very critical about them on politics, but on some of these issues, they make sense. And some of the women I've seen on here on different platforms, whether it be Kendra G, dating platform, or that used to come on Kevin Samuels, or that come on a number of other platforms, I hear them saying they want men that are 6 feet plus, without recognizing, for example, how many people on the planet are actually 6 feet tall and greater. It's not even 25%. I'm 6 feet tall, so I know. They want a six pack, a man that's in great shape. You got to be good looking. Okay, I'll give you that, but he has to make six figures. Ladies, let me explain something to you. If you actually understood how many men in America, around the world even, who make six figures, it is extremely low. And I mean 100,000. I'm not even talking like 250, 350 and whatnot. there's a handful of men that make six figures. They got to be great in bed, no kids, pay all the bills, get your hair and nails done. This sort of what they call high value man, right? The problem, ladies, why you don't have a good men today is because all the women in the world are chasing the 2% of men in the world that are this. Now, if you're a black woman, if you want to marry somebody or date seriously somebody who is a black man, that number is not even 2%. It's less than 1% that meet all those criteria: 6 feet tall, six pack, good looking, making six figures, great in bed, no kids, pays all the bills, and get your hair and nails done. Like, you're chasing a unicorn wrapped in an enigma, buried in a riddle, right? He doesn't exist. And if he does exist, because I do know some men who are part of that, who do meet all that criteria. They're either married already, right? So they've been out of the game for a long time, right? You got to take out the group that happens to be gay. I have a very good friend who is very wealthy, and he's gay. And he meets all those criteria, right? And he's married to a man who's getting all those great criteria, right? Or the third thing is all the men who meet that criteria know that all the women are chasing them. And they're not trying to settle down. They have their pick of the litter, and they have their pick of the lot. And they don't have to settle down. They literally can live their life dating very high value women around the world, not just in America, but around the world. And they're looking for compliant women. A person who is good looking, 6 feet plus, makes well into the six figures, is looking for a woman that's on his program, right? And so, to Corey Holcomb's point about dating and marrying a woman in poverty, these men will marry a woman that doesn't have degrees, didn't go to college, but is attractive, is fit and feminine, and will jump on their timeline, will jump on their program, right? If they're going to pay all the bills, if they're going to give you the lifestyle that you've always dreamed of, that's just not just because I love you, I'm going to give you my credit card and let you do what you got to do. These men have worked hard to get to these levels. And if they meet these criteria, they know they're the top 1% of men in the world. And so they're going to have certain demands because they're alpha males. They're used to getting their way. They're used to getting a certain type of woman. And it's their way or the highway. And think about it from their perspective, ladies. Why would they take your stuff into consideration when they can have another woman at their beck and call whenever they want them to have a woman, right? Whenever they want that woman to be with them. Any argument you make with them, hey, I'm out of here. Some of them may want to be polyamorous. Are you okay with that? But here's what a lot of these men want too. Some of this stuff is unrealistic as well. I'm not talking about the high value man. I think the high value man, which is what some of these women say they want, a lot of them are just outside of your league, ladies. I'm just going to be honest with you about that. But some of the men talking about what they want from women are living in the same kind of la-la land. They want a low body count with women, right? No kids, someone to get on their plan, right? But you make $60,000 a year, right? But I got to quit my job and be on your plan, right? They want you to be in shape, ladies. They don't want a lot of weaves, eyelashes, no bad attitudes. They want somebody that's going to follow their leadership, right? Are you willing to do that? Now, there's a lot of black women, particularly, who are career driven. God bless you. My wife has an excellent career. And they've used to like getting things on their own. They bought their own house. They've done certain things and so on and so forth. And are not willing to be led by a man. I hit a nerve there. Be led by a man. Now, if you say you want a Christian man, what does the Bible say about head of household, right? Now, there's some things that go along with that, right? A man's just not going to be the head of the household. But if you follow the Bible and the order is God, that the man of the house answers to God, right? He's the protector. He's the provider. He's the lead spiritual leader of the family, right? He answers to God, but the woman answers to the man and the children answer to the wife. Like, that's the order of a Christian man, right? Somebody who's saved and in the faith. Now, all I'm saying is we are unrealistic about what we actually want. Marriage and successful relationships are built on getting in where you fit in, doing what needs to be done to advance the interests of the relationship, of the family, and the household. And so when you say things like, Black Uhuru says, and cooperative, non-combative, agreeable, yeah. And I would think that's even what a man should be to a woman, right? At the end of the day, relationships work because you all have a general agreement about life, about how you view faith, how you view what a family should be, how you view your goals, where you see yourself in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years together, what you want out of life, what makes you happy, and whether this person can actually do that for you. And if you can't, then it's best to be alone. There's no crime in being alone. There's no crime in not getting married. There's no crime in not being in a successful relationship. But if you're going to do that, it's a coming together of two people who are willing to bend and even break to keep the other person happy. I love my wife because I know she will do anything to make sure I'm happy, to make sure I'm good. And I do the same with her. And that's not a 50-50 proposition. It's not a 70-30 proposition. I was talking to somebody earlier and I was like, I don't know what the proportion is about who does housework around the house, or who deals with our kids, or who deals with with the finances better, and who, like, we do what the household needs to have done, and we look out for each other because we're in it together for life. This is a commitment I made to life. When I married my wife, I knew this was somebody that I was not going to divorce. That divorce was not an option. That leaving her was not an option. That we were going to make this work because we made a commitment before God. And we brought family into this. We brought children into this. So that's all I'm saying, that when you start thinking about a relationship, you don't think about the marriage. You think about life after the marriage. You don't think about what kind of ring I'm going to get. You think about what's life going to be worth with this person. You think about, I'll be frank with you, you think about who in 40 years is going to wipe my behind. And am I willing to wipe somebody else's behind, right? When the looks go and illness comes and kids are problematic, are y'all willing to be a team and deal with that? Are you still going to be attracted to this woman or attracted to this man when his looks go, when her looks go, when she's not the same size that you married, right? The answer is yes, if you're serious. And it's not about, did he pay for this or he paid for that? I laugh at people who make those kind of comments because the reality is that I don't remember when you actually get married, because those things are not important. Relationships are based on too many things that are surfacey, have no depth, have no width, and no breadth. And the things you ought to be considering, I mean, you should have a basic attraction to somebody, but you should be considering their heart, how kind they are to people, how kind they are to you, and the character of the person that you're with. Those are the things that outlast time, outlast looks, outlast physical prowess, outlast problems that are going to happen in your marriage. There's a basic commitment to that, the essence of that person, a basic commitment because you are a good person of character, of moral value. You are a human being that is of worth something, and you're joining in with somebody else. And if you join in with somebody else like that, they're always going to look out for you. They're always going to be good for your spirit. They're always going to be good for your soul. And more importantly, there'll be somebody you'll be happy to grow old with. Stop being surfacey, folks, men and women, and look for the heart and the character of them. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about is financial talk. And someone posed this question to me, and I'm happy to answer it for you. Hypothetically, if you had $1,000, what would you do with that $1,000 to start you on your road to financial security and wealth creation? And why are we talking about this today? And why do I want to tackle this today? Well, I'm here to make an announcement to everybody who's listening. You ready? Because as of today, my family, and I'm blessed and honored to say to God be the glory for it, my family is officially debt-free. And you can be there too. Yes, except for the mortgages on our two homes, our home and another property that we own, that we still have the mortgage on. We no longer have any debts. The only thing we have to deal with right now is our monthly expenses in terms of life, but we don't have any debt. Don't own any student loans, don't have any credit card debt, cars are paid off. Anything you can think of that is a debt, we are no longer in. We are no longer in debt. So if you have $1,000, which is how we started our financial journey, what should you do with it to become debt free and to go on to the next stage, which we'll be talking about here as well, is how do we get beyond that to a level of wealth creation? Well, if I had $1,000, I do what I did when I had $1,000. I invested my $1,000 into an emergency fund. You'd be surprised how many people who are well-to-do, have great jobs, have great homes, have great cars, go on lavish vacations, go to Las Vegas and stay in the best places and drink top shelf liquor, don't have $1,000 in case of emergencies happening. Your car breaking down, needing a new tire, needing 2 new tires, needing an alternator for your car, right? Being stranded somewhere, not having access to real dollars for any kind of emergency that may happen, that may not, again, be a credit card. Start off $1,000 in an emergency fund for just emergencies, things that you can't account for, things that you wouldn't account for. Hit the bell. I should hit the bell for that. Freedom. Give me $1, please. Black Uhuru, you crack me up, man. I'll give you a round of applause for that. That's funny. So I put my first $1,000 into an emergency fund just to take care of emergencies. And then I'd follow a financial guru who knows what they're talking about. For me and my family, my church, shout out to Kingdom Fellowship AME Church in Maryland, which actually meets the needs of its parishioners and its members like me. In 2018, we started this journey, and we went through the baby steps of Dave Ramsey. But I also have a good friend who does platform work, does content work. Shout out to the Budgetnista. That's another resource that you can use to help you get your financial house in order. The Dave Ramsey plan is a 7-step plan, 7 baby steps. And the first step is $1,000 in emergency fund. And the second step is the hardest step. It's a step that my wife and my family have successfully conquered. And that is getting rid of all of your debt except for the mortgages of your properties, of your home. Why get rid of debt? There are some people who believe that debt can be used to leverage things. It can't be. And the Bible makes it clear. The borrower is slave to the lender. The borrower is slave to the lender. You don't have to applaud that. I'm gonna applaud that myself. Debt is what is stopping you from becoming wealthy in America. It's stopping you from becoming wealthy in America because the richest people in the world don't have any debt. They don't succumb to debt. They don't use debt. And that has been something that has been surveyed and interviewed, and people have studied for a number of years. And so get out of debt. Stop owing people things. Stop being a slave to the lender. Because when you do that and you don't owe people anything, then you start creating what they call baby step number 3. You take your emergency fund and you make that big enough to cover 3 to 6 months of household expenses. What does that mean? It means after you get out of debt, you can applaud yourself, brush your shoulders off, but then you have to create an emergency fund beyond $1,000. You have to create an emergency fund that can take care of 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses. Because you don't have any more debt, 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses. Why? Because you want to ensure and indemnify yourself from ever having financial problems and going in debt if you lose your job. If, God forbid, you get sick. if God forbid there is a calamity that actually happens in your house, or a fire that hurts your household, or a relative that gets ill, something catastrophic, you lose both cars and you got to buy new cars, right? You want to have a fund that will take care of your household expenses if you cannot work or you can't meet your bills for some unnamed reason. 3 to 6 months will actually do that for you so that you don't go back into debt, so that you have a fund that will take care of certain things. I recommend that if you can have $1,000, that you work your butt off, just like you work to get debt free, that you work your butt off to make sure that you have savings that will make sure of $100,000 if you can, $120,000 if you can manage it. If you can't, $20,000, $10,000 to $15,000, to make sure you don't ever go back into debt again. You keep adding to it, you build on it, you save. Why? Because you should realize some additional disposable income because you no longer have debt. And if you no longer have debt, you now have more disposable income to plow into making your emergency fund bigger. And then after that, it's a race to becoming wealthy and taking care of your needs right now. And those are baby steps 4, 5, and 6. And baby steps 4, 5, and 6 are simply put, you use the money that you now have. Now you no longer have debt. You now have 3 to 6 months of your household income secure, right? And then, you could add more to that. You can make it a year, right? You could add more of that to make it a year's worth of household expenses. But now you're free to take those dollars that you have, because you don't have any debt. You got a big bunch of money on the side to take care of emergencies. You now make investments, right? Stock market. You put your money then in the college fund for your kids, right? You take care of retirement. You bump up your 401k. If you have a matching fund from your employer, right? My employer matches 6% of what I put in, right? So I put in 6%. They match 6%, right? Of it. That's 12% of taking care of it. I only put in 6. You get the match to your retirement, but you up that to 15%. So if I put in 6, my company puts in 6, that leaves me, now I have 12% of my income. I now have 3% to invest. Start a Roth IRA for your retirement. If you have kids like I have kids, you up the amount of money you put into the college fund over these number of years, and you invest in the stock market. Now, what are the investments going to do? The investments are going to create something for you called compound interest. You know how rich people get rich? They invest in things that give them compound interest. They take their accounts, for instance, their checking accounts, their saving accounts, right? Their business accounts, whatever they have, and they put them in high interest bearing accounts. If you were in PNC or any number of banks, then you're going to get 3% tops on your accounts. If you put into a high investment account, right, the banks that do that, you might get 8%, 9%, 10% on the money you have invested. And so that's what you invest in. You invest in those kind of banks, but you also make investments with an investor, right, that can bring you compound interest. You let your money work for you because you don't have any debt anymore, and you got enough savings in the bank in case a calamity happens. You should have a lot of disposable income. Now, this requires you to live thrifty. I'm not trying to say that once you get this, you should be like, hey, man, I can go to Europe anytime I want to. No. You will be able to, but you'll be able to do it on the wealth. And what does that mean going in the future? It says you never go back in debt. It means you pay for everything in cash now. You don't buy a car and have payments. You go in and you don't buy a Maybach, right? You buy a car that's $35,000, $40,000, and you use your debit card to pay for it. And you walk out with no debt. If you're going to buy a house, you can go in debt with your house. That's the only thing you can go in debt for. But part of 4, 5, and 6 of your plan is you're paying your house down. You have a 30-year mortgage on your house. You now try to renegotiate and get a 15-year mortgage on your house, right? Because overall, you're going to pay off your house faster, and you should be able to pay those dollars. Why? Because now you have extra money that you were paying on the 30-year loan. You're not paying on 15. Yeah, your monthly rate goes up, but you have more money to do that. So you're paying off your house earlier, faster. Try to do it in 10 years if you can, because you can refinance and get those kind of dollars to be able to do that. And then you get to maybe step 7, This may take 5 to 10 years, right? Depending on your income. But when you get to baby step 7, you now have income. And now you do what money is for. You get to give generously to your family, to your friends, and to causes that you believe in. You start to be able to do what Warren Buffett is doing, right? Warren Buffett recognizes he has more money than he could ever spend in 7 lifetimes. And so he is giving bits and pieces of his wealth to all the things he cares about in the world. Now, you're not going to have Warren Buffett money, but you're certainly going to be able to fund and give dollars to the things you care about because you've taken care of your debt. You've now invested in your retirement. You're now invested in your family. You're now invested in those priorities of your household. And now you are ready to actually live life the way it needs to be personally, to take the trips you want to take, to invest in your own businesses, to invest in things that are going to actually give you dollars. You can buy property with cash, don't have any debt, right? Buy property with your investments and live off the proceeds. And then you can give generously. That's the Dave Ramsey. I encourage you all. I don't necessarily agree with Dave Ramsey on his politics, but that's how you get to financial freedom. And as I mentioned, check out my friend, the Budgetnista. She has a YouTube channel. She's from Newark, New Jersey. She will tell you, and her ways differ a little bit from Dave Ramsey, and that aspect. But she can give you good advice as well. The key is to get off your duff and do something, and don't think you're too young or don't make enough money, because the reality is I'm investing for my kids right now, and you can work a $60,000 job, and if you start early enough investing and don't look back, put in $250 a month, right, without blinking about it. You spend $250 a month going to parties. You spend $250 a month some places on Starbucks and eating out, right? You can't invest $250 a month into a fund that you can invest in, into a high interest bearing account, into things that you know are going to bring money back to you. A person making $60,000 a year, starting to invest in their 20s, can retire a millionaire just with their own investing. Never having a 6-figure job. Remember, ladies, you don't have to marry a man with 6 figures. He can still be rich. He can still be wealthy. He can still be somebody who has good financial sense. A simple person can do it. The reason why we don't do it is because we've never been taught to do it. And as Black people in particular, we have let other people in other communities get rich off of us, and we've never asked them how they get rich and going forward. Last thing I'll leave is this. I went to a lily white private prep school, and I can remember talking about my careers and thinking about what I wanted to do career-wise because I could make money. And my friends, a lot of them were wealthy, well-to-do, or were comfortable at least, talked about what they wanted to do with their lives that was going to make them happy and was going to give them the most joy, or was going to allow them to make a difference. And I was like, you're not worried about making money? They were like, anybody can make money. Now, you may think that's something that somebody would say who's rich, but I took it as something that somebody would say who knew how to make money. And you can learn the same lessons, and you can do the same lessons. You might not be able to do it because you don't have a rich daddy that can maybe give you money like Donald Trump's dad did or other rich people do. But you certainly can start doing the basic things to make sure that you will have a significant retirement income, and even faster if you start earlier with just doing basic investment things that these same rich people do. And maybe they net $10 million doing it, but you can net $1 million doing it with your way and with your dollars. And it's a simple investment of $250 a month. So if I was a young person, I would take my $1,000 and I would start my emergency fund, and I would immediately start to pay down debt. We started in 2018. It's 2024. We fell off the horse a lot of times. We incurred debt after we paid debt off. We incurred more debt, right? COVID helped us, and then we fell back into old habits, and then we found extra dollars here, but we did it. And it took 6 years to do it. Might take you 10, might take you 12, but you'll be able to do it. Get debt out of your life so that you can invest in the life that you want to have, in the family you want to have, and create legacy and create wealth and create the things and the lifestyle that you want. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. It's going to take diligence, consistency, And don't beat yourself up if you fall off the horse a couple of times. We did too, but we got here. Follow my journey as we start talking about how we build our emergency fund to 3 to 6 months. That's our next step. We're on baby step 3. Happy to take your questions about it as well. Black Uhuru said, but there's the problem. What happens if you meet a girl looking like Vanessa Williams and she don't want to go to the Cheesecake Factory? That is true. Black Uhuru, you got to get a woman that's willing to go to the Cheesecake Factory with you, man, because you got to tell her, I'm building something here. I'm creating something here. And there are women out there that do that. But find somebody who's got the same mindset as you in making that happen. Last thing before we leave out of here in the next 5 minutes is we're talking about a topic that we want to discuss going forward. You heard me talk about Corey Holcomb and the like. So I think the debate issue we're going to have is for next week are women are unrealistic about dating. Women, I'm going to put a hyphen on that, Black women are unrealistic when it comes to dating. Uh-oh. I'll applaud that myself. Okay? From a man's perspective, from a married man's perspective, women today are unrealistic in their relationship choices and what they think should happen for marriage. I said it. I stand on it. So come and debate me. But thanks for rocking with me today, folks. Please make sure you subscribe, like, and comment below. Share the feed. Share what we're doing here. We're building it as we fly. I've got a great team. Shout out to Naya. Shout out to Francis for looking out for a brother. We're going to go deeper into these discussions, or we'll go shorter. We might do more things, more topics, and talk about them in less time frames. But thank you for rocking with me. One more time, shout out to the Black and Old Gold. Shout out to any alpha within hearing distance. A506 to the good brothers. And shout out to New Beta chapter, my chapter of origin, the 465th house of Alpha. Thank y'all for being with me. Remember, stay curious and think. It ain't illegal yet.
Joining me right now is Newark Councilman